Hey, how's it going? I want to welcome you to a new installment of my video blog, A Walk Through the Prophets, continuing on our journey through the book of Ezekiel. Today we'll be looking at chapter 4, and we'll be looking at God's extreme message for Israel's extreme rebellion. Last time we talked about God's commissioning of Ezekiel as his prophet, giving him a message for a tough crowd, rebellious Israel. Heading into this chapter, I want to be honest, I really had a tough time swallowing at first what God asked Ezekiel to do. Not only did God have Ezekiel verbally give a message of prophecy to the rebellion, to the rebellious house of Israel, God also had Ezekiel become a physical, visual illustration of what was going to be happening to the city of Jerusalem and to the people of Israel and Judah. First of all, God has Ezekiel build a brick model of the city of Jerusalem. And he had him build around that battering rams and siege works and even like a metal griddle wall to represent what was going to be happening in regard to the fall of Jerusalem. God had Ezekiel build this to show people, hey, this is what's going to be happening to you. Here's a picture of reality. Then God has Ezekiel, first of all, make a whole bunch of food made out of, let me see here, this is chapter 4, verse 9. And you take wheat and barley, beans and lentils, millet and emmer, and put them into a single vessel, and make your bread from it. And then bake it over human excrement, human dung. And Ezekiel had a tough time with that. Why are you making me bake this bread out of something unclean? He cried out to God. He said, Lord, I've never defiled myself. I've always obeyed you. So God relents and has him actually bake these barley cakes over cow dung instead. Still unclean, but a step above human excrement. And so God has Ezekiel make a bunch of this bread and then measure out a whole bunch of water. For more than a year and a half later, he was going to need to have that as a supply for what was happening next. He explains it this way. He says, Son of man, behold, I will break the supply of bread to Jerusalem. They will eat bread by weight and with anxiety, and they shall drink water by measure and in dismay. I will do this, that they may lack bread and water, and look at one another in dismay, and rot away because of their punishment. Pretty extreme. But Israel's rebellion was pretty extreme. God continued to use Ezekiel as a visual illustration to the children of Israel. What God does in chapter 4 is he, after explaining to Ezekiel how to prepare this barley meal and how to measure out the water, he says, Ezekiel, I'm going to have you lie down on your left side for 390 days. Each day will represent a year worth of punishment for the children of Israel. And I'll even have you bound with ropes so that you can't roll over, so you can't turn to your other side. This will be a visual illustration. You'll be taking on the punishment of Israel visually. Then I'll have you turn over to your other side. So, on your right side, I'll have you lie down for 40 days. Each day will represent a year worth of punishment that I'll be giving out to the children, to the house of Judah. Yeah, it's not as long as the 390 days. However, you'll be taking on the punishment for Judah as well. God is going to use Ezekiel as a visual illustration of this punishment. When I first read this chapter, I wrestled with this. It seemed like Ezekiel was willing to obey God, to be his messenger, to be his prophet, to pass on the message to a rebellious house. But it seemed like God went a few extra steps and almost being abusive to his prophet to get across this message. Then it dawned on me. Throughout the Old Testament, God gave the children of Israel every opportunity to turn around. He gave them every opportunity to trust him and to worship him only. The reason why I'm okay with What God did through Ezekiel is I look at my own rebellion against God and how extreme it is. Israel's rebellion was quite extreme. I think we're all familiar with the cycle of going in seasons of obedience followed by seasons of disobedience where we turn our backs to God. God gave His chosen people, the children of Israel, every opportunity to turn away from idols, to give their hearts back to the Lord, to be 100% sold out to Him. God is a jealous God, not in the sort of jealousy that we're used to as humans with a lot of drama associated with it. His jealousy is pure and clean and righteous and just. It's a good sort of jealousy. He wants our hearts. He wants us to be wholeheartedly devoted to Him because of who He is. Also, it makes me think along the lines of my rebellion. God also had to get a pretty extreme message across to me and to us by sending His one and only Son, Jesus, to die on the cross for us. If that's not extreme, I don't know what is. I'm okay with how God used Ezekiel to pass this message on to His people. Yeah, pretty hefty stuff. But also, God's love for His people, God's love for us is quite significant, and it runs deeper than any sin and any rebellion we might have. I want to encourage each of us to look at this from God's perspective. Look at your life from God's perspective. Look at our rebellion and our sin through God's perspective. He did send Jesus, an extreme method of taking care of our extreme rebellion.